The cliffs of Normandy, June 1944, loomed like jagged teeth against a sky bruised with storm clouds. Rain lashed the rocky outcrops, mingling with the acrid stench of gunpowder and the coppery tang of blood. Corporal Daniel Ward crouched in a shallow foxhole, his US Army fatigue soaked through, his M1 Garand rifle slick in his hands. His squad, 5 men, all that remained after the D-Day landings, huddled in the same cramped trench, carved into the cliffside overlooking the bloody beaches below. The distant roar of artillery punctuated the night, but closer, a strange hum vibrated through the earth, not mechanical, not human. A sound that made Ward's skin prickle. He glanced at his men. Private Rousseau, clutching a rosary. Private Klein, bandaging a shrapnel wound on his leg. Sergeant Brodie, scanning the cliffs with a flashlight that flickered in the damp. And Private Larson, muttering under his breath, his eyes darting to the shadows. They'd been ordered to hold this position, a lookout point above Omaha Beach, to signal for reinforcements if German counterattacks came. But the radio was dead, its wires frayed, and the supply drop never arrived. The squad was cut off, trapped between the sea and the cliffs, with no way out but through the night. Ward tightened his grip on his rifle, his breath shallow. The hum grew louder, weaving into voices, faint, fragmented, calling names in languages he didn't understand. Rousseau's rosary slipped from his fingers, landing in a puddle of muddy water. "You hear that?" he whispered, his voice barely audible over the rain. Brodie's flashlight swept the cliffside, its beam cutting through the fog but revealing nothing but wet rock and twisted barbed wire. "Wind," he said, his tone flat but his hand trembled on flashlight. The voices came again, sharper now, not from the wind or the sea, but from the cliffs themselves, as if the stone were speaking. Ward's stomach churned. He'd heard the stories from the locals before the invasion, tales of Normandy's cliffs, cursed by the blood of centuries, where the dead whispered to the living, luring them to their doom. Old fishermen's ghost stories, he'd thought, meant to scare green recruits. But now, with the hum turning into a chorus of murmurs, those stories felt like truths. Larson stood abruptly, his helmet askew, his face pale. "They're calling me," he said, his voice hollow. "They know my name." Before Brodie could grab him, Larson scrambled out of the foxhole, slipping on the wet rock toward a narrow path leading higher up the cliff. Ward lunged after him, but Brodie held him back. "Stay put, Corporal. He's spooked. He'll come back." But the voices grew louder, and Larson's footsteps faded into the rain. The first turning point came an hour later. A scream, human, raw, unmistakably Larson's, tore through the night, echoing off the cliffs before cutting off abruptly. Brodie cursed, grabbing his rifle, and ordered Ward and Rousseau to follow. Klein, wincing from his wound, stayed behind, his Thompson submachine gun cradled in his lap. The 3 men climbed the slick path, their boots slipping on loose shale, the flashlight's beam barely piercing the fog. At the path's end, they found Larson's helmet, dented and smeared with blood, lying beside a jagged crevice in the cliff. No body, no tracks, just the helmet and a faint, lingering whisper that seemed to come from the rock itself. Ward's heart pounded, his hands numb despite the rifle's weight. The voices were clearer now, not just calling names, but pleading, demanding, "Join us. The cliffs are ours." They retreated to the foxhole, the hum now a relentless drone that vibrated in their bones. Klein was gone. His Thompson lay in the mud, its magazine half empty, as if he'd fired at something before vanishing. Rousseau's prayers grew frantic, his rosary beads clicking like gunfire. Brodie's flashlight flickered, its beam dimming as if choked by the fog. Ward noticed the shadows on the cliff walls, shapes that didn't match the men, too tall, too thin, moving against the rhythm of the light. He blinked, and they were gone, but the chill in his chest remained. "We need to move." Brodie said, his voice cracking, "Back to the beach, signal for evac." The path to the beach was a descent through a maze of rocks and craters, each step a gamble on treacherous ground. The voices followed, no longer whispers but a chorus, overlapping, anguished, speaking in English, German, French, languages of the dead from battles long past. Ward's boots sank into the mud, and he felt it, a pulse in the earth like a heartbeat, slow and deliberate. Rousseau stumbled, clutching his ears, muttering about the voices knowing his sins. Brodie's flashlight died, plunging them into darkness lit only by the occasional flare bursting red over the sea. The air grew thick with the smell of blood and something older, like damp stone and decay. The second turning point came when they reached a narrow ledge overlooking the beach. A figure stood there, shrouded in fog, wearing a tattered WI uniform, its face obscured but its eyes glowing faintly, like embers in the dark. It was Larson, or something wearing Larson's form. His lips moved, but the voice wasn't his, a guttural chant that matched the cliff's hum. "You can't leave," it said, the words echoing in Ward's mind. Rousseau screamed, bolting toward the figure, his bayonet raised. The figure vanished as Rousseau reached it, and he stumbled, tumbling over the ledge into the darkness below. His scream faded into the crash of waves, leaving only silence. Ward and Brody pressed on, their breaths ragged, the voices now a deafening wail that clawed at their minds. The beach was a graveyard of shattered landing craft and bodies, the sand slick with blood and oil. They found a wrecked radio post, its operator slumped over, his face frozen in terror, his hands clutching a headset that crackled with static, and voices, the same voices from the cliffs. Ward tried to signal for help, but the radio emitted only the chant, "Join us." The cliffs are ours. Brody's face was ashen, his bandage unraveling, blood dripping onto the sand. "We're not alone," he whispered, his eyes fixed on the cliffs above. The climax came as they huddled in the radio post, the night closing in like a noose. The voices became figures, shadows in tattered uniforms, their faces half gone, their hands reaching through the fog. Ward fired his Garand, the shots deafening, but the figures didn't fall. They pressed closer, their touch like ice, burning through his gloves. Brody swung his rifle like a club, shouting for Ward to run, but the shadows were everywhere, merging with the fog until the world was a blur of cold and darkness. Ward's vision swam, the voices now inside his head, pulling at his thoughts, his memories. He saw his home, his wife's face, then nothing but the cliffs, endless and hungry. He didn't know how he survived. Dawn broke, grey and weak, the sea a mirror of the sky. Ward lay sprawled on the beach, alone, his uniform torn, his hands bloodied from gripping his rifle. The radio post was empty, Brody gone, the shadows gone, the voices silent. The cliffs loomed above, their jagged edges cutting into the sky, but they were still, as if sated. In the sand beside him, Ward found a single dog tag, not his own, not Brody's, but Larson's, its edges blackened as if burned. He clutched it, its weight heavier than his rifle, and staggered toward the distant sound of Allied ships, their horns faint against the waves. As he walked, the wind stirred, carrying a faint whisper, a single name, his own. The cliffs stood silent, but Ward felt their gaze, a presence that would follow him beyond the war. He didn't look back, but the dog tag burned in his hand, a reminder of the voices that never truly left. The Normandy beaches stretched behind him, bloodied and quiet, but the cliffs, he knew, were not empty. They waited, as they always had, for the next soul to claim.